The cameras caught Scheffler and Ted Scott in an argument on the range, and what happened next on the golf course made it even harder to explain. This is not a rumour, not a hot mic situation. The PGA Tour's own broadcast cameras were rolling when the number one player in the world and his caddy of 7+ years had a conversation that neither of them expected to see on television. Body language tight, exchange direct, and the people in the broadcast truck made a decision. They kept it in the feed. We are talking about a partnership that has produced 13 PGA Tour wins, 2 Masters titles, and a gold medal at the Paris Olympics. And the cameras just showed everyone a crack in it 90 minutes before the final round started. Honestly, I think what that exchange reveals about the pressure Scheffler is operating under right now is more important than anything he said in his post-round press conference, because players do not argue with Ted Scott when things are going well. They argue with Ted Scott when something is already wrong. Is this a one-day blip in one of golf's best partnerships, or is there a deeper problem building inside Scheffler's camp that nobody is covering? Drop it in the comments right now. And stick around, because what Scheffler said about Ted Scott after the round is the part nobody expected. Here is what you need to understand about how the Scheffler-Scott partnership actually works. Ted Scott caddied for Bubba Watson for 12 years. 2 Masters titles with Bubba. He knows Augusta better than almost any caddy alive. When Scheffler's previous caddy left ahead of the 2021 season, Scott was the hire, and within 18 months, Scheffler won his first major. Their dynamic is not the quiet, deferential caddy-player model you see with some tour partnerships. Scott talks. He pushes back. Multiple players and caddies who've been in earshot describe him as one of the few caddies on tour who will actively disagree with a player's club choice in the middle of a round, loud enough that the player hears it clearly. That quote sounds different now that the cameras caught them arguing. But what happened in that final round, and what Scheffler said after it, reframes the whole story. That's coming up. Ted Scott has been on the PGA Tour bag for 19 years, 12 with Bubba Watson, including 2012 and 2014 Augusta victories, 7+ with Scheffler, including the 2022 and 2024 Masters. He has more combined major wins as a caddy than most active players have as competitors. He is also someone who does not make public statements about his players. He does not do interviews. He does not have a media presence. When other caddies go on podcasts and talk about what it's like inside the ropes, Scott is the one you do not hear from. Which is exactly why what the broadcast cameras caught on that range landed the way it did. The footage, which Golf Channel's broadcast team referenced directly in their pre-round coverage, showed Scott and Scheffler in an exchange that lasted approximately 4 minutes near the end of their warm-up. Scott's hands moved. Scheffler's head went down. When Scheffler looked back up, his response was short. Scott nodded. They did not speak again before Scheffler walked to the first tee. 4 minutes. With a caddy who does not waste words. Sit with that for a second. The number one player in the world just told the press room that his caddy correctly identified a problem, he resisted the correction, and the first 9 holes of a final round suffered for it. That is not the answer of a player who thinks the argument was unnecessary. That is the answer of a player who knows Ted Scott was right and is now saying it on record. The argument on the range was not dysfunction. It was Scott doing exactly the job Scheffler described when he talked about wanting someone who won't just tell him what he wants to hear. You are Scheffler. You have 13 tour wins. Do you believe him instantly, or do you push back? Most players push back. Even the best ones. Even when they know the caddy has been right before. What the cameras caught was Scheffler pushing back. What the round confirmed was that Scott was right. Is a caddy who argues with the world number one before a final round an asset or a liability when the pressure is that high? And does Scheffler's post-round answer change your read on what the cameras showed? Drop it below. I read every single one. And stay with me, because the player who 12 years, 2 Masters, a partnership so tight that when Watson's career started winding down, Scott had his pick of bags on tour. Players at every level wanted him. He was the most proven clutch caddy in the game after what he'd done at Augusta. He chose Scheffler, a player who at that point had 0 PGA Tour wins. The bet Scott made was not about the money. Top caddy money is top caddy money, regardless of whose bag you're on. The bet he made was on a player he believed would become something serious, and on a partnership where his read of the course and the player would actually matter. That partnership has produced everything Scott could have wanted. But here is the thing about being the caddy who tells a player hard truths at full volume on a final round range. It only works if the player trusts you enough to hear it, even when every competitive instinct is telling him to defend his own read. The promise of the partnership, the thing both of them agreed to when Scheffler said he wanted someone who'd push back, gets tested hardest in exactly the moment those cameras caught. Pre-final round, in contention, when the natural human instinct is to not change anything and just trust what got you here. Scott saw something. He pushed. Scheffler resisted for 4 minutes. What has been reported by people close to both camps is that Scheffler's previous caddy and Scheffler disagreed repeatedly on course management decisions in pressure situations. The previous caddy deferred. Scheffler made the calls, and when the results weren't there, there was no external check. Ted Scott was specifically hired because he would not defer. The argument the cameras caught is not evidence the partnership is broken, it is evidence the partnership is working exactly as designed. The question the tour media has not asked is why Scheffler's team went out of their way to hire someone who would fight with him, and what that tells you about what has been reported by people close to both camps is that Scheffler's previous caddy and Scheffler disagreed repeatedly on course management decisions in pressure situations. The previous caddy deferred. Scheffler made the calls, and when the results weren't there, there was no external check. Ted Scott was specifically hired because he would not defer. The argument the cameras caught is not evidence the partnership is broken, it is evidence the partnership is working exactly as designed. The question the tour media has not asked is why Scheffler's team went out of their way to hire someone who would fight with him, and what that tells you about what Scheffler knows. One player this week pushed back on the idea that the range footage was significant. He said caddy-player arguments before final rounds happen constantly, and the only reason this one got attention was because the cameras were there. That player is Scottie Scheffler, 2-time major champion, 2024 Open and PGA champion, one of the most composed players on tour, and someone who, after his own run of breakthrough wins last year, understands exactly what a final round pressure environment does to a player's relationship with his caddy. Scheffler told reporters, "Scottie and Ted are fine. Guys get into it on the range all the time." But here is where Scheffler's defense misses the specific thing this footage showed. The exchange with Tiger and Williams was typically quick. A number, a club, a win call, resolved in under 60 seconds. What the cameras caught with Scheffler and Scott ran for 4 minutes. On the range, not over a yardage, over a swing issue. A 4-minute swing argument before a final round is a different category of conversation. It means one of them saw something significant enough to push on, and the other was resistant enough to push back for 4 full minutes before something moved. Scheffler defending it as normal range talk is accurate in category and wrong in degree. Is Scheffler right that this is normal caddy-player communication that only looks dramatic because cameras were... Here is the number that frames everything else about this story. Scheffler has been in final round contention 22 times in the last 2 seasons combined. He has converted those positions into wins at a rate that no other active player on tour can match. When Scheffler goes into Sunday with a lead or within 2, the field's historical conversion rate against him is under 30%. Those numbers were built during rounds where presumably the pre-round preparation went exactly as planned. Clean warm-up, clean range session, clean walk to the first tee. The question that the footage raises, and that nobody on the broadcast team asked directly after the round, is what his... You are a player on that leaderboard, watching the Scheffler-Scott footage air during the pre-round show. You are 3 shots back. You have been trying to figure out if there is any version of today where you catch him. And then you watch the number 1 player in the world spend 4 minutes on the range arguing with his caddy about a swing issue. That is the first real opening you have seen all week. Did it matter? Look at where Scheffler finished. Then ask yourself what the round would have looked like if Scott had stayed quiet. Here is the question underneath all of it that the most dominant player in professional golf, a player who has separated himself from the field more clearly than any golfer since Tiger's peak run, built his team around a caddy who will fight with him. Not a caddy who confirms his reads, not a caddy who defers to the world number 1 because that is what world number 1s expect. A caddy who will stand on a range 4 minutes before the narrative of a final round gets set and say, I see something, we need to fix it. Even if you don't want to hear it right now. That is not a personality quirk. That is a competitive decision. Scheffler chose that partnership because he understands something about himself that most elite players spend their whole careers not understanding. He knows his instincts under pressure are not always right. He knows he will defend a flawed... What the footage actually showed was not a partnership under strain. It was a player who is good enough to win 13 times and still self-aware enough to hire someone to check him when it matters most. The players who do not have that, who surround themselves with people who agree with them because disagreement is uncomfortable at that level, are the ones who lose final rounds they should have won. Scheffler hired the disagreement on purpose. Does hiring a caddy specifically because he will fight with you make Scheffler a more dangerous competitor? Or does visible on-camera tension with your caddy before a final round get in your head regardless? Drop your answer right now. But here is where Scheffler's defense misses the specific thing this footage showed. The exchange with Tiger and Williams was typically quick. A number, a club, a win call, resolved in under 60 seconds. What the cameras caught with Scheffler and Scott ran for 4 minutes. On the range, not over a yardage, over a swing issue. A 4-minute swing argument before a final round is a different category of conversation. It means one of them saw something significant enough to push on, and the other was resistant enough to push back for 4 full minutes before something moved. Scheffler defending it as normal range talk is accurate in category and wrong in degree. Is Scheffler right that this is normal caddy-player communication that only looks dramatic because cameras were present? Or is a 4-minute pre-final round swing argument a signal that something was genuinely wrong? Drop it in the comments. Be honest.
My verdict, 1 sentence. The cameras showed everyone a player who built his team around someone who will tell him the truth at the worst possible moment. And that makes Scheffler harder to beat, not easier. If you want the full breakdown of what the Scheffler-Scott dynamic looks like walking into Augusta, and why it matters for every player trying to close that gap, subscribe. Because the major where Ted Scott has 3 wins is the real exam for everything the cameras showed this week. This story is not over.
Here is what to watch going forward. The next major is the test. Augusta is coming. The course where Ted Scott has 3 wins as a caddy, 2 with Bubba, 1 with Scheffler. The place where Scott's reads are so trusted that players who have caddied Augusta for decades still call him before the week starts. If Scheffler and Scott arrive at Augusta with whatever the range footage showed already resolved, and based on Scheffler's post-round answer, Scott's read was vindicated by the back 9, the partnership walks into Augusta stronger than it came out of the tournament where the cameras caught it. That is what happens when a disagreement turns out to be right. If the issue is not resolved, Augusta will find it. That course always does. What the footage actually showed was not a partnership under strain. It was a player who is good enough to win 13 times and still self-aware enough to hire someone to check him when it matters most. The players who do not have that, who surround themselves with people who agree with them because disagreement is uncomfortable at that level, are the ones who lose final rounds they should have won. Scheffler hired the disagreement on purpose. Does hiring a caddy specifically because he will fight with you make Scheffler a more dangerous competitor? Or does visible on-camera tension with your caddy before a final round get in your head regardless? Drop your answer right now.